Welcome to Afterlives of Ancient Egypt, in which we discuss ancient history and relevant current events. I'm Kara Cooney, and I love to take deep dives into history that are not always possible in academic formats. So let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Afterlives of Ancient Egypt. I am your intrepid host, Kara Cooney, and I am joined by my indefatigable co-host, Amber Myers, and we will be working through a new series of podcasts, a series that will be about the different parts of the individual. But before I jump into that, Amber, give us a hello.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Awesome. Thanks for being here and working
yeah, of course,
through.
this should be a fun series if we can sustain it.
I know. Well, we can start by talking about the disagreement about the parts of the individual. There is a rather woo new spiritual perspective that there are 9 parts of the individual, and yet the Egyptologists generally focus on only 7. Both are really good numbers, I want to point out. If you're into numerology and special numbers that have a great meaning, both 9 and 7 are pretty damn cool. As Egyptologists, we're going to focus on the 7 because the last 2 that are often jammed in there from the more spiritual perspective don't necessarily in our Egyptological estimation fit as descriptors of the individual self, or at least don't have as much importance. Maybe that's because they were they were more hidden from the normal man or woman in ancient Egypt and more for the initiated. That's completely possible, and I'm not discounting that. But in this series, we will focus on 7, and those 7 will be the Ba soul, the Ka soul, the Ren or the name, the Ah soul. Probably do the first souls, the 3 souls first. The Shut or the shadow of a person, the Ib or the heart of a person. We'll almost certainly discuss the Hati, heart, at the same time. The Hat or the corpse. And those are your 7 main parts. And if you go on Wikipedia or you go on, your interwebs and you're like, what are the parts of the individual? You're going to see some people talking about Sechem or power as one of the souls or spirits or parts of the individual. You're going to see somebody talking about Sau, maybe like some. Amber, what did you find for translations of that?
Like spiritual soul or body. It's very ambiguous. And discussion of these aspects, I think, is complicated enough. So I think that you're right. We should stick to the aspects that we have more information on.
Yeah, like if we're going to talk about Sechem, then why don't we talk about Was? Why don't we talk about, so then I start to go down the slippery slope of everything belongs to the individual. We could have 21 parts, 42 parts. I mean, how many divisions of 7 do we want to do, or 9 or whatever? So we're going to keep it to 9 and try
7.
to, I'm sorry, we're going to keep it to 7 and try to work through the soul parts first, and then break down some of the more physicalized aspects. Shut is more physicalized. The Ib or the heart is more physicalized. The Hat, the corpse, is obviously physicalized, and the Ren is like your reputation in the world. It's more of a physicalized earthly thing. But the Ba, the Ka, and the Ah are things that if you ask 3 Egyptologists for a definition of each of them, you would get 3 different answers, because it's a very amorphous and unclear method of differentiating spirit, differentiating the formlessness. And so we're going to try to work through that as best we can. And for those who disagree, please go to the Substack, put things in the comments, start a discussion, because there are many ways of looking at all of these things. So today we shall start with the Ba. Yeah.
Yes, we're gonna jump in with the Ba. And before we do that, can we just give our little caveat about we're about to have some philosophical, religious type of discussions. And when it comes to ancient Egypt, we're missing like 90+% of the evidence that must have originally existed. And in many ways, we're trying to find our way in the dark without really a nice bright flashlight. We don't have a lot to go on. And so I think we should keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Who knows we don't know what we don't know. How's that?
Yeah. And as usual, I will put in the caveat that this will be very much a New Kingdom perspective thereof, that we're not going to work through this chronologically and be like, in the Old Kingdom, it seems the Ba meant this, but in the Middle Kingdom, da da da. It's going to be like a New Kingdom end result, very much. Not that I won't necessarily pull in knowledge from, I don't know, Edifice of Taharqa of 25th Dynasty or something like that. I mean, if things fall into place, then we'll discuss them. But really, this is going to be an 18th, 19th, 20th dynasty discussion, much of it based on underworld books from the Valley
Yeah,
of the
and
Kings and other places.
yeah, that's a great point to bring up, because it seems from the sources that we do have the idea, or the way the ancient Egyptians saw the Ba or thought about the Ba did evolve and change somewhat over time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a great point to make.
Everything's a moving target. We're talking about 3,000 years plus of culture, religion, politics, all of the things. And so you have to understand that we're being timeless in our discussion, and yet not really. So we should point that out as another caveat. And we're going to start out with a dictionary that's written by Faulkner. I have my copy right here. Middle Egyptian, Dictionary of Middle Egyptian, Raymond Faulkner. Many of you may have it. Handwritten because of a lack of fonts. Only the French determined that all Egyptian hieroglyphs should be jammed into fonts that they created for their printing presses, which creates problems of its own, because you're demanding that things be fit into a particular font. But most British and American Egyptologists, before they had computer programs, hand wrote their texts. And so we have a dictionary that is actually handwritten. It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing to look at.
Making sure I have all of my embarrassing tabs closed. No.
Okay, great.
There we go. I would make it bigger, but then it's going to take away my view of Zoom.
No, but that's perfect. That's everything that we need. So you see that Ba is right there at the very beginning of the B section. For those of you that have your Faulkner, you can go to page 77 and go to the B section. If you don't have a Faulkner, it doesn't matter. Go to the B section of any dictionary you have and take a look at the word for Ba, and you can immediately see that it's written with a bird. Amber, what bird is this?
It's the saddle-billed stork, is what it's been described as. Do you want me to go away from the dictionary for a second? I can pull up an image of the bird.
Sure.
If I can.
I am no bird expert, dear listeners. And, I looked up some things about this bird, and I'll point those out, which is that the male is larger and more colorful than the female. There is a great deal of sexual dimorphism in this creature. So that's interesting. The plumage is very bright and colorful. For the male, the beak is very bright and colorful for the male in particular. It is largely silent as it moves around. Only when it's nesting does it make some sort of a quiet bill noise with its beak or its bill. And the way that it hunts, it stabs its long bill into the water. And so I want you to understand that the Egyptians are very visceral, very corporeal, and they're looking at this as a masculine entity of stabbing, of penetrating,
of agency.
Of male agency. And indeed, it is meant to be phallic in its male agency. And for those of you rolling their eyes and going, oh my God, everything's about sex for you guys.
It took us about 3 minutes to get to the phallus in the conversation.
And yet, this is a bird of solar creativity, which we'll get to. But to create in a solar way, the god Atum, he becomes aware of himself by reaching out his hand to his own phallus and then creating his own masturbatory creation. And this bird, by stabbing into the river waters, the muddy waters, but the river waters to catch a fish, is there creating that penetrative sexual sort of motion. And the Egyptians noticed that. In fact, many African cultures have noticed this. This is an African bird that is Amber, you were saying is largely absent from Egypt now
Yeah,
and might
we
have been even
actually,
absent in ancient times.
yeah, we don't have any remains of this bird from any period in ancient Egyptian history, and we don't see it depicted in artistic scenes that you might say would be meant to describe or depict like everyday life, right? Like you see it in religious context, but not in scenes where it seems that Egyptians might have been encountering it in their daily lives. And so the question was, it did it migrate? Did its habitat change? This must have been it must have been a memory from the deep past, this bird and the actual reality of it, because later depictions seem to be very iconographic. They're not necessarily true to the actual physical appearance of the bird. So
It's
that,
super interesting for a
yeah,
culture that mummified so many different creatures to not have this is interesting, and to have this, as you say, be a part of the deep past. The bird now exists in Central and Southern Africa, so it's a part of the deep African
yeah. And so that's
past.
the question. Maybe was it at one point in the more northern part of Africa, and then maybe its habitat migrated and changed? We don't know.
Yeah. And yeah, it's super interesting. And then I'll point out like some kings associate themselves with the Ba. The first one, I think, was Ha-Ba, the appearance of the Ba, third dynasty king, not very well known. We say Ka-Ba, usually Egyptologists do. Um, but that's pretty interesting. But it's the way the word is written in the text is as this, it's almost like writing a saw duck, but it's taller, and then it has like this little feather plumage coming out of its chest. So as you can see, the writing of this bird is quite summary. It almost looks like a saw duck, the way that Faulkner's written it, and then it just has like this little extension on the chest, which is presumably some of the bright plumage that the bird exhibited. I don't know if there's disagreement about the Ba being a different kind of bird. Did you see
I
that?
mean,
Is it this?
I looked at a few sources. There was a great Encyclopedia of Egyptology article by Yuri Yannick, and he didn't discuss any kind of debate in that way. The debate seems to be more surrounding exactly how to define Ba and what it was and what it could do and how the Egyptians saw it.
Okay. Okay. But saddle-billed stork is what we're going with. African bird, pretty large bird associated with masculine action and force and solar abilities. So let's look at the Faulkner really quickly. So you can see the Ba is defined as soul, and we'll spend a bit of time defining what that soul actually might mean. And then look at the signs as he continues. So he's got that Ba bird, and then there's that stick. There's that weird stick following it. And that stick is a sign for death. You'll often see the word Mut associated with the mother goddess, but associated with death, written with that stick. And so we are to understand that this soul or this spirit only comes into being when you die, when your body has deceased and you are immaterial and you've gone someplace else. And for this, I would advise people to look at something like Jan Assmann, who in his Death and the Afterlife, or what is it, the book called Death and Resurrection in Ancient Egypt, talks about the disintegration of the person, the fragmentation of the person, and how you are whole with all of these parts as a living person, but then they fragment at death. And when they fragment, arguably, as in Star Wars, that you become more powerful than you can possibly imagine, right? So this idea of the Ba being liberated upon death from its prison of the body, in a sense, and being able to move freely is a particular
Well, and
feature.
yet still tethered to the body in some
Yeah.
way. Like the Ba, it seems clear that the Ba needs the body in some way. But let me also point out that Yannick discussed this question of, was the Ba a part of a person in life, or was it only a posthumous kind of manifestation? And he was looking at the evidence and made the point that we don't have a lot of evidence, and you could actually make a case going either way. So, just a few of the short examples that he pulled up In some of the literary texts, it does seem to be associated with the afterlife and existence after death. So, for instance, in Sinui, it's connected with some sort of a death-like state, right? And then in the instruction of Mary Colray and autobiographical inscriptions, it's associated with mortuary cults, one's reputation after death. And then in the dialogue of a man with his ba, it's definitely associated with death and
Yeah.
the afterlife. So again, we don't have a lot to go on, to say the least. It's sparse evidence, but there does seem to be a very strong connection with life after death and death itself with the ba.
One of the writings, and I don't think I see it here, but one of the writings that's quite common for the ba as a spirit or a soul is not the stick of death, but the man who's crouching and hitting himself with an axe in the head, which is another symbol for, it's a hieroglyphic symbol for death. And it's almost like a suicide sort of symbol. You know, he's killing himself. And one thinks of the dialogue of the man with his ba, which does seem to be a dialogue about suicide, about removing yourself from this world because the world is so difficult, the world is so hard, and that there is a release of bliss when you die. And so there is this understanding that you can only get to that power when you reach the other side. And the Egyptian, we'll get to this when we talk about the Akh. The Akh is that superpower dead who is able to liminally move between the world of the living and the dead, but as a dead soul is able to bring power to the living. And so you get this Egyptian idea that you do become more powerful than you can possibly imagine in death, but in life, imprisoned in the body, you can't release that power in the same way.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about too, because okay, if the ba is really associated with death and life after death, where is it while you're alive? That's some of, I think, the deeper theology and philosophy that we're not really going to be able to get at. But and also this idea that the ba is tethered to the body. It's a spirit or aspect of the soul that seems to be associated with movement and freedom, like you've already pointed out, and yet always in some way is connected to the body and must return to the body, and is like you can't have one without the other in some way.
Right.
So
And
it's interesting to think about.
the other writing that we see right there in the Faulkner, it's the fourth writing. It has an incense pot. So what that little pot is with the line coming out of it is a container for incense that is on fire, arguably, or smoke is coming out. Let's go with smoke. It doesn't really matter, but it's an incense pot. So you're giving incense, frankincense, myrrh, some sort of sweet smelling resin, a mix of other oils and unguents to burn for the dead. And that sweet smelling connection to the dead then activates the ba or brings the ba into your presence. And then right behind that is not the stork, but is instead a human-headed bird. And here we have, as you say, Amber, this idea that the ba soul is tethered to the body because it has a human head. It's bird and human. It's like when you see a god depicted, you show a god with maybe a lion's head and a female body, and you have an image of Sekhmet, right? A lioness head and a human female body. Or you see the Sphinx, which is the human head of the king, and then the lion's body recumbent, laying down with the arms outstretched. But this idea of divinity being part the power of the natural world, and then part the human element of individuality, where you have a gender defined. The one that you just put up on the screen has a feminine gender defined. I think, you know, like that kind of tripartite wig. And but it has a beard on it, actually, so it's divinized. I don't know, it could be a headcloth of some kind, but often the gender is denoted on the human headed ba. And so you get an understanding of the mobility. You know, the Egyptians would often talk about the birds flying about at sunset being the last flight of the ba souls, and then when the sun sets, they go back into their sleep. and maybe even return to the duat, return to the underworld. And here you have a depiction of such a soul bird. And yeah, it's amazing to see that divinized human animal element, that we are much more than our individual human selves.
Yeah, Yannick discusses this particular representation of the Ba as being, first of all, a later representation and symbolizing this idea of unlimited movement. So the human head, as you've already pointed out, it denotes that human or divine nature. And then the bird body is all about movement, transformation, and also, as Yannick argues, the ability to pass through different realms. So a spirit that it doesn't seem to be limited to one particular realm.
Yeah. Yeah. When I'm translating it for students, I often say the soul of mobility, soul of movement. It's that part of you that can leave the body, go off someplace else and come back. It's a little different from the ka that doesn't seem to be on the move, on the go as much. It's there resident in a statue, resident in a container of some kind, but not moving about. And I think that it's important then, given that it's a soul of mobility, to associate it with the sun and the sunlit sky, because Remy and I were out looking at the moon yesterday, got the telescope out, and every time he would get the viewfinder set to have the moon had already moved, right? These are fast moving bodies. And if you read the Great Hymn to the Aten, Akhenaten tells us that it's, moving quickly, its steps are unseen, and yet it's like racing through the sky. And so this understanding of a solar body moving quickly, this is the human soul's association with that movement. So it follows the sun, it goes with the sun, through the daylit sky, and then into the underworld when the sun sets, to keep with the sun, to follow it.
Yeah. Yannick, when he's discussing this idea that the Ba is permanently tethered to the body, he absolutely brings up the daily solar cycle and the sun god's Ba reuniting with his corpse in the underworld. And I think is suggesting that the Ba helps a person to be a part of this cycle, a part of the solar cycle, which, as you've just pointed out, is like fast moving, constant movement, right? It's always going in perpetuity.
Right. And then, so if you go back to I won't make you go back to the Falconer. It's too much to go back and forth. Stay here.
I think it's just one image back.
Oh, it
So
is?
I think we're good. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
My computer is still slow. I'm so sorry. Like
No,
every
don't
time
worry.
we get on
Don't worry.
Zoom. There we go.
There we go. Oh, okay. So then another element that brings a lot of this together is where you see the Ba means a ram, and you see it written not with the stork, but with that incense. And then the determinative is the ram, and the horns of the ram, those curled, broad horns, are very much associated with the sun, solar movement. I was just looking at Nefertiti's crowns. Her blue crown has, at the early stages, is depicted on some of the boundary stela, the shoot feathers inside, and then the ram's horns in association with those shoot feathers. So her crown is containing that solar energy. Like those horns are the masculine element and her crown is the feminine element, right? Everything is about sex in the end. I'm so sorry. But the solar sexual element here is depicted by the ram. A ram is such a sexual element that when domesticated, there can only be one. And you do lambing season, you kill all of the other male entities in your herd, and you keep one ram alive. Maybe you'll have another young one on the ready, but otherwise you try to keep it limited to this one. And the solo idea, I think, is interesting. Like solo, he is alone. The stork I read is usually alone when you see it in the wild. It's not there in a group, which is interesting because we'll get to the ba'u, the plural, in a bit. But this idea of being solo, being wa in Egyptian, I think is important. And the ba ram in a herd being the only one being solo, I think that is, for the Egyptians, the sun par excellence. That's the idea of there is only one sun. There can only be one sun. There's not two. There's not many. You get one, and that is its power. So yeah.
Well, and again, continuing on in this idea of the Ba being associated with death and the solar cycle, the ram, when I think of the ram, I also think of the dying sun,
Yeah,
Atum. And
exactly.
it seems to be indicating like a very particular part of the solar cycle, like that death of the sun.
You are indeed correct. And the incense brings that in. Like I remember when I was first with Remy, and I remember I put my chopsticks in my rice bowl inappropriately, and he's like, "You cannot do that. Your chopsticks must always lay across your bowl, because if you put them in the bowl, like sticking up even a little bit, it is like the incense in the bowl for the dead that are sticking straight up out." And that incense is burning for the dead, so it's bad luck. It's a superstition. You would never do it, and I didn't know the reason. And so that association with death is very much there for this power. But I love that a power is only released upon death, and it gives. We really need to pull from the ancient world, having gone through this pandemic, having seen so many of our loved ones die and go to the other side. I love the idea of superpowers being released upon death, that as she says in The Mummy, that death is only the beginning. It has a more foreboding feel, of course, when she says that, but yeah, it's a pretty cool way of releasing might, releasing power.
Yeah, no, I think it's great when you start to begin to peel back some of the layers here, you realize just how deep it really goes and
Yeah.
how many sides this little ball Rubik's cube has. You just flip it around.
Well, because it's also a leopard, right? And you
Yes,
can
yeah.
see that it's a leopard or a leopard skin. And
Hmm.
the leopard skin is worn by a particular priest that's associated with father-son succession and lineage and the procreation of the son by the father. So there's this there's a solar lineage, but a patriarchal sort of lineage. It is a very patriarchal idea of soul, the soul that can produce himself. So, and then this leopard, like think of the Tutankhamun statue that was the one that was damaged in the 2012 revolution, where Tutankhamun is standing atop the leopard and he's striding along, and the leopard is like the sun, and he is upon the sun and traveling with it. So you get this idea of that particular kind of big cat as associated with the sun. It is a sphinx-like
Yeah,
understanding.
and that is a very good point to bring up because Egyptologists have also discussed the Ba's association with just heavenly bodies,
Mm-hmm.
which again just reinforces that idea of the connection with the solar cycle and movement and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And then next in our little lineup is this verb, which is written with the B, written with the ba, written with the aleph, and then it has the agricultural instrument, the hoe, to dig into the earth. And we have this idea of hacking up the earth, which is what the stork in its habitat might do with the water or muddy waters. It would drive its bill into the earth to collect certain kinds of fish that dwell in the more muddy parts, and so you have this idea of like ripping things up, devastating things, destroying, again, very patriarchal masculine meaning of what is power. This is a world we very much inhabit right now, as we have wars all over the world and the big men are showing their strength. This is the kind of soul power that I think the world very much identifies with, an idea of virility, that penetrative virility that men try to show. And with all of, from everything to weaponry to sexuality, the big men of the world, no matter their age, are trying to show that destructive hacking power. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go on, because I think Bau is something of a separate discussion in a way, a couple of things. I would like to pull out a couple of texts,
Yeah,
just
that's great.
just very small bits that we can maybe just look at and think, huh, that's interesting. But also maybe before we do that, talk about the Ba as being associated also with earthly visible manifestation of the divine.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we've been talking about it within a human context, but in theory, also, if it's associated with death in the afterlife, each human is hoping to die and then become divinized, right? And so I think that that's important to point out as well.
You're drawing me away from the wooden pegs and the Bach, the penis. You're like, stop with
Would
the
you get the?
pill.
No, you can get it. Tate, I'm not going to stop the phallic part of the discussion because it's always there in one way or another. And I think that it makes a very good point about patriarchy.
The
And
cause not going to be much different, that discussion.
yeah,
It's
right.
got the same flavor, and it's interesting. And when we start to bring in the idea of feminine and masculine and maybe look for a more matriarchal understanding, there's not a whole lot there except for the shoot and the hot, that are feminized elements, right? The shadow is a feminized thing. The hot, the corpse is a feminized container. The haughty heart is feminized, but the ib is masculine. So most of these elements are very masculine, and it's interesting how we almost get to the 2/3 male, 1/3 female sort of idea that you get discussed in late Greco-Roman temples, is how divinity is formed and how much is masculine and feminine. But yes, go on.
Yeah,
Go
first of
on.
all, let me just say, I think this is all to reinforce that for the ancient Egyptians, that the masculine was very much associated with creation and the creative potential and that sort of thing. And I don't think that we can underestimate that as a hugely important part of the whole process, right?
Yeah.
And so we're just drawing a line under that. But one of the points I thought we should make before we move on from the Ba is just, like I said, this idea that the Ba was also associated with sacred animals and or just manifestations of divinity or the power or will of divinities, and therefore in many ways has a very physical association as well.
Yeah. Which text do you want to read?
So for instance, I thought because we've been talking about the solar cycle, there is, of course, Book of the Dead, chapter 17, which
Mm-hmm.
is all about the union of the Ba and the body. So the
Mm-hmm.
Ba being Re and the body being Osiris. And this is very explicitly stated in the text. And there is a section, like it's just a couple of lines, but it reads, his name is acclamation of Re. His name is the soul of Re, with which he copulates himself. And soul in the text is Ba.
Right.
Um,
Okay, so I'm looking at the transliteration, and it's Bapu en Ra Ren F Nek F Yim F Jes F. And those of you that know your Egyptian know that Nek means to copulate, or in more popular language, to fuck. And if you go to Egypt and you yell the name Nick to someone, everyone who's an Arabic speaker will turn around and look at you because you've just yelled fuck at a very,
do not recommend.
Don't do it. Don't do it. So be careful with that one. I love it that ancient Egyptian words and modern Egyptian words, modern Arabic Egyptian words mean the same thing. But we have here the idea that it is the Ba of the sun that he copulates with it himself, right? So it's pretty cool to see the sexual components of that. And this is from chapter 17 of Book of the Dead. So
Yes, yeah.
and it must have an older source as well, but
Yeah,
with that
I'll include
with
the
that
link
poo
for
statement, the
yeah.
grammar is archaic, right? So
yeah, I will include the link for the page where this translation is. I believe it's a University College London page. But yeah, I just thought that pulling out just that little bit was just again draws a line under the connections that we've been drawing with the Ba. And then also, I also pulled a little bit from the dialogue of A Man with His Ba, just because it's a fascinating text and one very complicated, and I don't think that this is the place for us to get into that. But just the fact that such a text exists, I think is good to point out because it shows that the Egyptians maybe were going back and forth and thinking about these aspects of the individual, aspects of the soul, and grappling with it themselves.
Right.
And so I think that's a great thing to keep in mind.
So I opened up my copy of Lake Time, which I've had since graduate school, and in which I made little notes And I have here a note from class with Betsy Bryan at Johns Hopkins University. And I have here that she's arguing that as the Ba is connected with the sun god, and the Ba is here being criticized in a sense, that solar religion itself is potentially being criticized. That if you take yourself out, if you commit suicide, if you remove yourself bodily, then we have the line, you will not go up to see the sun. And so there is a potential criticism of anti-solar religion or solar religion that's gone too far in the Middle Kingdom. And so that's interesting that debate exists in the Egyptological world. That's pretty cool. But it's this idea you have in the text here, page 164 of the Lichtheim, my Ba, too ignorant to still pain in life, leads me toward death before I come to it. So you have this idea that the Ba is like, I want to be released. I want to feel my power. And so there's this human understanding that every human has some great divine element within it that's bursting to come out and maybe even leads a person to death before they want to go there. I don't know. What do you
Yeah,
think?
it is interesting, right? And I think that's the point is Egyptologists read that and they're like, wait, what are we talking about here? Because in many ways, when you're reading the text, it almost seems a little like schizophrenic. Like one section is making one point, life is good, the soul is arguing, hey, you want to stay alive. But on the other hand, as you've pointed out, there's also this sense of a pull toward death. And actually, in that vein, I just texted you a little section. It's from a translation by Allen. It's the last little bit of advice that the Ba gives the man. And I thought that might be worth pulling out and looking at.
Okay. So that text is, desire me here and reject the West, but also desire that you reach the West when your body is interred, and that I alight after your death. Then we shall make harbor together. And you're right, the whole text is like this debate
It's back
between,
and
do I
forth,
stay, do I go, do I stay, do I
one
go,
step forward, two steps back, right?
and it's very frustrating text to read. And then we have this conclusion at the end, bringing it all together, that you desire the Ba in life, right? But by doing that, you reject the West. So you also have to desire that you reach the West when your body is actually put into the tomb. And then I get to be free. I get to alight after your death. And in that way, then they say, then we make harbor together. And I want to point out, I know I'm always talking about sex and it's horrible, but I need to look at the Egyptian words of what make harbor is. But menit, to go to the dock and to put the pin in to the dock, it also has a sexual
Absolutely.
understanding.
All throughout ancient West Asia, actually, the idea of mooring is associated with sexuality and sex and that sort of thing. So that's an excellent point to make. But reading that first section, desire me here and reject the West, I almost wonder if it's some sort of injunction to enjoy the manifestation of the divine on earth here and don't race toward death or desire death or, as we mentioned before, have this sort of suicidal outlook on life. So, but it does seem that in one part of the text it says one thing and then it's immediately followed by something that sort of takes that back or walks that back or says the complete opposite. So it is a very interesting but frustrating text to try to get into and attempt to really break down.
No, it's true. Like there's one section on page 165 of the Lichtheim. It's one of the more famous sections, perhaps. My Ba opened its mouth to me to answer what I had said. If you think of burial, it is heartbreak. It is the gift of tears by a grieving a man. It is taking a man from his house, casting him on high ground. You will not go up to see the sun. Those who built in granite, who erected halls and excellent tombs of excellent construction, when the builders have become gods, their offering stones are desolate, as if they were the dead who died on the riverbank for lack of a survivor. The flood takes its toll, the sun also. The fishes at the water's edge talk to them. Listen to me. It is good for people to listen. Follow the feast day. Don't worry. So, I mean, there's this with a religion that's so oriented towards that release of power with death, then you might get people who are so interested in that they forget to live and are not there fully present in the moment. So there is an encouragement to be in your human body, to not worry so much about the release of that ba soul, and don't worry, forget worry. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a very common human trait.
Yeah.
I think even today we very much can get caught up in things that take us away from just sitting back, experiencing and enjoying the present.
Yeah, and we might come back to this text again when we discuss the name, because there is the
Yeah.
poem about my name reeks.
Mhm.
And it's pretty brutal, because he tells his ba, my name reeks more than carrion on a summer's day of burning sky. I mean, it's pretty brutal to have your reputation be this smelly, horrible thing, and then the ba will answer him. But it's a text about social disorder. It's a text about the earth being a messed up place of competing factions and brutality and awful things.
Well, and
And
the
he's,
feeling that you
yeah,
yourself as a human, I'm messed up, I'm not a good person,
yeah,
so maybe I should just tap out,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
And there is that famous poem at the end that brings the ba back in a positive way through the idea of incense, because he says, death is before me today like a sick man's recovery, like going outdoors after confinement. Death is before me today like the fragrance of myrrh, like sitting under a sail on a breezy day. Death is before me today like the fragrance of lotus, like sitting on the shore of drunkenness. So we have the idea that death is that release, is the beautiful smell of incense. And so, but again, it goes back and forth until the ba at the end is like, okay, dude, we're going to join together. It's all going to be okay. And
Well, but also this
yeah,
idea of the ba or the divine as some sort of a surrounding kind of presence, because if you think of the wind, in some cases being identified as the ba of Shu, and the wind is the very air itself. So yeah, you get this sense of a divinity that just surrounds you.
yeah, yeah. And that when you're downtrodden and upset, your ba is there to pull you out of it. So you also have that divine element within you the whole time. And in that way, it's a beautiful text. It's this guy who's like, the world sucks and I want to peace out. And the ba is like, I need you to calm down. I need you. I'm here and we're going to have our release in our time, but not yet. And I need you to understand that what you're doing here is important for my existence as well. That you can't just end it and have that
Yeah,
power.
you
It
can't
doesn't
skip a
work that
part of
way.
the cycle. You
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
you have to walk through the full process. Yeah.
The discussion between the man and his soul is one of the most confusing texts that you'll ever
Yes, it
read
is.
in Egyptology. I encourage you to go and read a version of it, some translation of it, and try to figure it out on your own. It's not an easy thing, and it doesn't make our discussion about the ba that much easier, except to say that it's a divine element of the person. But then how is that differentiated from the ka? How is that differentiated from
Hmm.
the shoot?
It helps to illustrate the complexity that must have existed for the ancient Egyptians and the way they viewed and contemplated these different aspects of the individual.
Yeah.
And that there was like a deep theology and philosophy that they surely were engaged in, and that we don't have a great view of from our perspective here.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Whatever you
let's
have
look at
next.
let's think about the ba in the plural, then think about bau.
Okay. Um, it's an interesting thing that when you pluralize something, that the meaning can change to something abstract, to something much different than the singular. So the ba being spirit of mobility, spirit of one person, associated with the sun.
Well, and something that is associated with just living beings. And then Bau as you pointed out, is it spans the meaning to incorporate not just living beings, but also inanimate objects.
Yeah, because you can have a power to something. And the translations in English are power, strength, wrath, glory. So this idea of something that is absolutely overwhelming you. And the way it's written is with the ba bird, sometimes the aleph, just for the phonetic complement, and then an oo, and then the book roll and the plural stroke. So the book roll gives you an idea that it is an abstract thing. And I also like the idea that you can have one soul and one ba, and there is power in that singularity. But when you bring all of those together, that multiplicity of Boz brings power. And in the late period and on, especially, you see more discussion of this. It's something that's not as discussed in as if it's for the it's not good to write down for the uninitiated or whatever. It's something that's kept much more close to the chest in the earlier time periods. But this idea that a god can have Ba'u, but that you could name the different Bas of a particular god. You can talk about the number of Bas of the god Amun-Re and then name them and discuss them. And by knowing those names, you have some means of connecting and harnessing that power magically. Like if you look at the Edifice of Taharqa text, you see that Amun-Re does have his Bas listed and differentiated and discussed, and it is in the crypt. It's in a very secret place that is only for the initiated to go, and hidden away. We don't have the top of that temple, so I can't compare it to what else would have necessarily been there, but it is something that it's a multiplicity of power. It's like, I am legion. I am not just one. I can multiply myself, and become everywhere. It's like if you think of the solar sun as one element moving through the sky, but you did a time lapse where you took a picture of that sun as it moved through the heavens, and you just got a dotted sun going through the sky, and you can see it in each of its manifestations. Each station of the sun is a different Ba. And then if you take the entirety of the sun's power, it is all of those Bas put together. And I think that's what the Egyptians are trying to explain. It's like, I am one, but I am legion at the same time.
Yeah, it's like the plural is action and strength. Yeah, it's pretty interesting because just looking at just say a person themselves, there are the many aspects of the individual, and then you look at the divine, and it's almost as if they want to suggest that at least some divinities have an infinite number of Bas
Yeah.
because you want that infinity because it expresses that incredible divine power and that it can never be exhausted. There's no limit to it.
Which is, of course, why the parts of the individual are ideally 9, and people are always searching for 9 because 9 is the smallest number that in the Egyptian
It's
ideology
plurality for the ancient Egyptians.
it represents infinity, not just plurality, right? So
Right,
3
yes, yeah.
3 is plurality, and 3 times 3 is 9, but it is also infinity. And that's why you have the 9 layers of protection around Tutankhamun's body, which is the only intact tomb of the New Kingdom that we've ever found. And so that's our foundation for understanding that. But this idea of multiplicity or infinity, it is infinite power. And I would also link that to the sun. And when you look at, it's interesting that Akhenaten doesn't ever write the word Ba in his great hymn to the Aten, but he talks about his steps being millions. And so you have that idea of the multitude there in the text without saying the word Ba, that the notion is there nonetheless.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll definitely revisit that idea and that discussion when we get into the Ka, because you mentioned that Ka is mentioned many times throughout the great hymn to the Aten. And
I think he's avoiding the Ba, Akhenaten is, because
that's just what I was wondering is like, why does he not want to mention it?
Well, because one of the first places you see the Ba is the Ba'u plural is Ba'u Iunu, which are the Bas of Heliopolis,
So
right?
it refers to the other divinities that he's wanting to get rid of. Is this what you're saying?
It's referring to, I mean, I think Akhenaten was deeply connected to Heliopolis. And I think he chose this out of the way place, Akhenaten, so as not to create political issues. He needed a third place, a third space that wasn't competitive, like a Washington, D.C. between Philadelphia and Richmond, Virginia, or whatever, right? So he needed this third space, but he brings the Merware bull, the Menvis bull, to Akhenaten. He brings the Heliopolitan living god, the bull of the sun god, to Akhenaten. He says, we're going to do a burial here, which to me implies that he's got the bull cult there, where they're dressing him up, they're combing out his fur, they're making him all pretty, they're bringing him all the pretty cows that he wants. That living cult of the bull is arguably brought there. And so this idea of the power, the Bau of Heliopolis, the power of Iunu, it's all the different manifestations of the sun, from beginning to end, from before dawn to after sunset, to all the stations in the Duat, which are understood as millions or an infinite number of powers. And so that is singularized into the Aten, into that physical shape of the Aten. And so having put everything in there, the ideas of the Ba just come along with it. And we were talking earlier, Amber, you were talking about Jan Assmann and his discussion of these things. I mean, he takes these ideas much further in some of his writings, and we'll put that citation in the show notes. But it seems that while Akhenaten doesn't mention about or picture that human-headed bird, or it's very much a part of his theology that that the power of the sun is there, and the multiplicity, you could argue, is physicalized, that he doesn't name Bau, but all of those altars are the different stations that the sunlight hits upon the earth, right? It's millions. He's trying to create this idea of multiplicity, of Bau, of power. And by feeding the sun from thousands and thousands of altars, he's then trying to manifest that notion without writing it.
Like you're saying, maybe like subsume that idea of Ba and Bao into Ka, or just like a singularity, like a single all-powerful thing.
Yeah, I'll have to think about this more, but like I'm looking at the short hymn to the Aten on Lichtheim's page 91, and I have here, they lay down as if to die. This is when the sun sets. Their heads covered, their noses stopped, until you dawn in sky's eastern lightland horizon. Their arms adore your Ka, as you nourish the hearts by your beauty. And so we get this idea of the Ka being there, but we don't have a singular Ba being represented. And why is the Ka?
It's interesting by its absence there. But also thinking about, and we're getting a little too much into the Ka here maybe, but also the Ka's association with offerings. And I'm just remembering our episode on Akhenaten's obsession with offerings and feeding and that sort of thing. And yeah, I definitely think we're gonna table this and bring it back up in the Ka episode and talk about Amarna theology and Ka.
Assmann's not wrong. The Ba exists without you saying it. So he has here, this is page 92 of Lichtheim, you are one, yet a million lives are in you. Mm-hmm. So it's, you are the one Ba, but you are the Bau simultaneously. So you have the one with power, the singularity, but you are also legion. And that is a key solar aspect. And that's why you have the Ba, and then the Bau of Iunu, the souls of Heliopolis. It is all of the different manifestations of the sun god. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we got deeply philosophical. I was going to say
there's some deep cuts there, but I mean, I was expecting this with this kind of discussion, because it's so easy to, okay, they've put out this idea, and now similarly to Assmann, like, okay, let's run with it a little bit and see where is it actually leading. And it's one of those things where you can just keep walking down that path.
Yeah,
almost
really can.
For infinity, because you just continually encounter new ideas, new possibilities, new ways to look at it. And again, these are deep discussions and things that we can debate, having so very little of the texts and the information that must have existed in the past. And so it's mind-blowing to think, what if we, in some fantasy world, had access to an ancient Egyptian library that just was filled with texts over the course of those centuries? Just what kinds of crazy, mind-blowing things would we be able to pull out of that?
Yeah. I mean, having grown up Catholic, I always think of the Trinity when we get to moments like this, and the idea that God is one, and yet it is the Father, the Son, and then the Holy Spirit, and that tripartite existence is a one and a many simultaneously.
Exactly. And it's and Christians have no problem viewing it that way. It doesn't blow their minds. It's like, oh yeah, well, God is one, but also three. And
even four for the Roman Catholic, because you bring in the Virgin Mary, right?
Yeah.
And then you add another element, but the Holy Spirit also has a feminine element. So maybe that's always there, right? That the Holy Spirit is that divine feminine. And again, you get 2/3 male and 1/3 female. So the Egyptian is there in a way that is very startling sometimes when you look at it. But it all goes back to some humans looking at the saddle-billed stork driving its beak into muddy waters and fishing for itself, and seeing a silent
and seeing
solo
strength and action, and just this idea of manifestation and transformation. Yeah.
Yeah, a white bird that the sun hits and then it lights it up, and that orange yellow beak, or reddish beak that is there like Atum of the setting sun. There's all kinds of things that one can work with here, and then the idea that it's that mobility, it's that movement of the sun that you can hardly track. As I said, we were watching the moon. You can try to watch the moon move, but you can't really see it. You have to look away and then look up, and it's this weird thing
that moon
we're
last
not
night
able
was
to see.
Gorgeous.
Oh, it was gorgeous last night.
Especially when it was hanging low. I mean,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a beautiful moon. Beautiful moon. Maybe I'll include some pictures in our show notes. That would be
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
He got some good telescope pictures. They were really, really cool. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I guess we'll end here. And thank you everyone for coming along this philosophical journey with us. And make sure you head to our Substack if you're not already there. If you're just listening on Apple or a Spotify or something else, head to the Substack, because we do put out written content. So there's some fun stuff out there, and you can be a member. All of our content is free and always free. If you can be a paid subscriber, it just helps us to keep this little operation going.
Well, and they can follow you on Notes on Substack and become a part of the Ancient Now chat with other people who read the Substack and listen to the podcast. So it's worth checking out for sure.
And we'll do another live soon. We do Substack lives. We had a good audience for our last one, so maybe we'll jump in there again soon. And meanwhile, Amber, what's the name of this podcast?
Afterlives of Ancient Egypt.
Thanks everyone for joining. Talk soon. Thank you to our listeners for your support, and please subscribe. If you enjoyed the show, share it with all your friends, and most importantly, leave us a 5-star review. Send all those ancient world questions and topic suggestions for future episodes to ancientnow@substack.com. We actually do read them all. You can find info on all my books, articles, and upcoming lectures on my website. Just head to karakuniegyptologist.com. Amber puts all of that together. Oh my God, thank you, Amber. Check out our Substack Ancient Now at ancientnow.substack.com, where we share perspectives on all that history and archaeology news every week and continue the conversations that happen after the podcast mic is turned off. Support the show by becoming a paid subscriber at our Substack Ancient Now community. This keeps the show free for everyone, and paid status gives you access to our archives. Thank you to our current supporters. I'm at all the social medias. Look for @Karakuni. Thanks to the team at Patina Productions for this podcast, which I must point out is wholly separate from my academic work at UCLA. See you next time on Afterlives of Ancient Egypt.